Obese Amish girl sold as punishment for getting pregnant, but the Amish man had shocking plans. A young Amish girl is dragged before her community, her secret shame plain for all to see. The elders declare her punishment: she will be sold like property to wipe away her family's dishonor. The crowd whispers, the church bell tolls, and her world shatters. But then, something no one expects. The man who takes her doesn't bring chains, he brings mercy. Instead of cruelty, he offers her a home and even dares to call her child his own. The town gasps, furious at his defiance, and just when hope flickers, the true father returns. Not Amish, not welcome, and he's brought the railroad with him, hungry for the land, hungry for the child. Now the girl and the man who saved her stand at the edge of ruin. Will his shocking stand of faith and love protect them, or will the weight of shame, prejudice, and power tear them apart forever? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The grey clouds hung low over Lancaster's town square that spring morning in 1878, matching the sombre mood of the gathered Amish community. Luna Stoltzfus kept her eyes fixed on the muddy ground as her father's firm grip guided her forward. Her plain dress, though modest, could not hide her condition from the condemning eyes of the crowd. The whispers cut through the morning air like icy wind. She brings shame to us all. One woman muttered, "The English father won't claim her or the child." Another voice added, sharp with judgment. Luna's shoulders trembled, but she refused to let tears fall. The weight of her unborn child seemed heavier with each step toward the town center. The elders stood in a stern half-circle, their black coats stark against the weathered wooden buildings behind them. Luna's father pushed her forward, his voice cracking as he spoke the traditional words. "According to the Ordnung, she must be sold to restore honor to our family." Luna's heart pounded against her ribs. She knew what usually happened to fallen women. They were sold into practical servitude, forced to work off their shame in someone's kitchen or barn. The crowd's murmuring grew louder, like angry bees. Through her downcast eyes, she saw a pair of well-worn boots step forward. "I will take her," a deep voice declared. Luna recognized John Yoder's voice, the widowed farmer whose property lay at the edge of their settlement. She dared a glance upward, meeting his stern gaze. John reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of coins. The metal caught what little sunlight filtered through the clouds as he counted them into the elder's palm. The transaction was quick, efficient, like trading for a horse or a plow. Luna's throat tightened. But then John Yoder did something unexpected. Instead of roughly grabbing her arm or ordering her to follow, he shrugged off his heavy wool cloak. With gentle hands, he draped it around her shoulders. The warm fabric enveloped her, and for the first time that morning, Luna stopped shaking. "She comes with me," John announced, his voice carrying across the square, "not as a servant, but as my wife." His words fell like stones into still water, creating ripples of shocked silence. Luna's head snapped up, her eyes wide with disbelief. The crowd erupted in gasps and mutters. "He can't mean it," someone said. "The Ordnung forbids it." Another protested. Even the elders shifted uncomfortably, their stern faces clouding with confusion. Luna searched John's face, trying to understand. His expression remained unreadable, but his eyes held something she hadn't expected. Not pity, but a quiet determination. She couldn't fathom why this respected farmer would risk his standing in the community for her sake. John's hand found hers, warm and calloused from working the land. He didn't grab or pull. He simply held it, offering support she could choose to accept or refuse. Luna's fingers curled around his, finding strength in his steady grip. Without another word, John led her toward his wagon. The crowd parted before them, their whispers following like autumn leaves in the wind. Some faces showed outrage, others confusion, and a few, mostly young mothers, held glimmers of sympathy. The wagon's wooden step creaked as John helped Luna climb up. She settled onto the hard bench, his cloak still wrapped protectively around her shoulders. The wool carried the scent of hay and honest work, so different from the bitter taste of shame that had filled her mouth all morning. John took his place beside her and picked up the reins. The horses stamped their feet, eager to move. Behind them, the muttering continued. Luna heard fragments of harsh judgment and predictions of divine punishment, but they seemed to fade as John clicked to the horses. The wagon wheels turned, first with a groan, and then with growing momentum. As they pulled away from the town square, Luna kept her eyes forward, focused on the road ahead. She didn't look back at the faces of those who had gathered to witness her shame. Instead, she found herself watching John's profile, wondering at the quiet strength of a man who would defy tradition to shield a stranger from cruelty. The clip-clop of hooves marked their passage down the muddy spring road, leading away from the judgment of the town and toward John's isolated farmstead. The morning remained grey, but somehow the clouds seemed less threatening now. Luna pulled the cloak tighter around her shoulders, holding on to this unexpected gift of dignity as they rode in silence toward whatever future lay ahead. The wagon wheels creaked and splashed through muddy puddles as John's team of horses pulled them steadily toward his farm. Luna sat rigid on the hard wooden bench, her hands folded tightly in her lap beneath his wool cloak. The afternoon sun tried to break through the clouds, but managed only a weak, watery light that cast long shadows across the rutted lane. Luna couldn't help but notice John's hands as he handled the reins, strong and weathered, with calluses that spoke of years of honest work. Yet there was a gentleness in how he guided the horses, never yanking or slapping them with the leather straps. Those same hands had offered her protection when everyone else had turned away. The silence stretched between them until John cleared his throat. "I lost my wife Sarah 5 years ago," he said, his deep voice soft but steady. "We had no children. The good Lord didn't bless us that way." He paused, watching the road ahead. "The house has been quiet since then. Too quiet, sometimes." Luna darted a glance at his profile, trying to read his intentions. His beard was shot through with early grey, though he couldn't be much past 30. The stern set of his jaw softened slightly as he continued speaking. "I know what some say about following every letter of the Ordnung," John said, steering the wagon around a deep mud hole. "But I've studied my Bible, and I believe the Lord desires mercy more than sacrifice. Says so plain in Hosea, chapter 6, verse 6. His words carried the weight of long consideration. Sometimes showing mercy means standing apart from the crowd." Luna's hands twisted in her lap. This talk of mercy sounded fine, but she had learned the hard way that men's words couldn't always be trusted. Was this marriage just another kind of cage? She had gone from her father's strict house to public shame, to this stranger's wagon in the space of a morning. Her baby kicked, as if sensing her unease. The sun was setting by the time they turned onto a narrower lane that led to John's farm. The 2-story farmhouse came into view, modest but well-maintained, with smoke curling from the chimney. A barn stood solid behind it, and neat fenced fields stretched into the gathering dusk. John helped her down from the wagon, his touch careful and impersonal. Inside, a lamp burned on the kitchen table, casting warm light over simple furnishings, a cook stove, wooden chairs, a few pieces of sturdy furniture. Everything was clean and orderly, but Luna could feel the emptiness of the rooms, the absence of a woman's touch. "Let me show you where you can sleep," John said, picking up the lamp. He led her up the narrow stairs to a small bedroom. A neat bed with a colourful quilt stood against one wall, a chest of drawers against another. "This will be your room," he explained. "Mine's across the hall. I'll fetch your things from the wagon later." Luna stood in the doorway, clutching her cloak around her shoulders. The room was plain, but comfortable. Far better than the servants' quarters she had expected. Still, she couldn't quite believe this kindness would last. Back downstairs, John moved efficiently around the kitchen, setting out bread and ladling stew from a pot that had been keeping warm on the stove. "Sit," he said, pulling out a chair. "You need to eat, for the baby's sake if nothing else." Luna sank into the chair, the familiar smell of beef stew making her realize how long it had been since breakfast. She took small bites at first, then found herself eating with real hunger. John broke the bread and passed her a piece without comment, but she saw him notice when tears began sliding down her cheeks. "I know you have no reason to trust me," he said quietly, "but I want you to understand something." He waited until she looked up at him. "As long as you're under my roof, no harm will come to you or your child. That's my promise before God." After the meal, they knelt separately for evening prayers. Luna's whispered words were broken by silent sobs, gratitude mixed with fear, hope tangled with bitter experience. When she finally lay in the strange bed upstairs, wrapped in the soft quilt, sleep refused to come. She stared into the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar creaks of the house and the steady sound of John's breathing across the hall. His words of promise echoed in her mind. They were good words, kind words, but experience had taught her that words could change as quickly as spring weather. Still, something about John's steady manner, his careful distance, and the gentle way he handled his horses made her wonder if, perhaps, this time, the words might prove true. The morning arrived with a gentle tap at Luna's door. Outside, the sky was still dark, though a faint glow on the horizon promised dawn. John stood in the hallway, a thick wool shawl in his hands. "For the morning chill," he said, offering it to her. Luna wrapped it around her shoulders, grateful for its warmth. Her back ached from the strange bed, and the baby seemed especially active this morning. They walked together to the barn, their boots crunching on the gravel path. The air smelled of damp earth and early spring, and somewhere in the distance, a rooster announced the coming day. John carried a lantern that cast dancing shadows across the barn's weathered boards. Inside, the barn was alive with quiet sounds, the rustle of hay, the soft clucking of chickens, the occasional stamp of horse hooves. John hung the lantern on a hook and turned to Luna. "The hens need tending first," he explained, leading her to the chicken coop. "Gather the eggs careful-like, and then we'll scatter their feed." He demonstrated how to reach under the sleepy hens, his movements slow and deliberate. Luna nodded and took the woven basket he offered. Her swollen belly made it awkward to bend and reach, but she was determined to prove herself useful. The hens clucked and shuffled as she gathered warm eggs one by one. Sweat beaded on her forehead from the effort, but she pressed on until the basket held a dozen brown eggs. "Well done," John said simply, noting her flushed face. "Here's the feed." He showed her how to scatter it in even handfuls, bringing the chickens running in a feathered flood. By the time they finished the morning's tasks, Luna's back was aching fiercely. John noticed her discomfort and gestured toward the house. "Go rest on the porch. I'll tend to the horses." Luna sank gratefully onto the wooden porch swing, watching the sun climb higher over the fields. The morning air had warmed, and she let the gentle motion of the swing ease her tired muscles. The creak of wagon wheels broke the morning peace. A buggy approached the house, driven by a woman Luna recognized with a sinking heart. Sister Byler, one of the strictest matrons in the community. The older woman's face was set in harsh lines as she climbed down, her black dress as severe as her expression. "John Yoder," she called sharply. "A word with you." John emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a cloth. His face remained neutral as Sister Byler marched up to him, her voice carrying clearly to where Luna sat. "Have you lost your senses?" Sister Byler demanded. "Taking in damaged goods against the Ordnung? The whole community is talking about your foolishness." Luna's cheeks burned with shame. Her fingers clutched the porch swing's chains so tightly they hurt. Every instinct urged her to flee inside, away from the cruel words that echoed her own fears. But John's response stopped her. His voice was quiet but firm as steel. "Sister Byler, this is my house." He stepped between the woman and the porch, his broad shoulders straight. "And in my house, she is not damaged. She is my wife." Sister Byler's face reddened. "You mock our ways with this charity. She'll bring nothing but shame to your door. The only shame I see comes from those who forget mercy." John replied evenly. "Now, I have work to do. Good day to you, sister." The woman's mouth worked soundlessly for a moment before she turned and stalked back to her buggy. The wheels threw up dust as she drove away, leaving a heavy silence behind. Luna remained on the porch swing, her emotions tangled between gratitude for John's defense and fresh waves of shame at being the cause of such conflict. She had brought trouble to his door, just as Sister Byler said. The day passed in quiet industry. Luna forced herself to focus on the tasks she could manage, washing the morning's eggs, sweeping the kitchen floor, preparing a simple supper of beans and cornbread. They ate in silence as darkness gathered outside the windows, the tick of the kitchen clock marking each moment. Finally, Luna found her voice. "Thank you," she whispered, "for what you said to Sister Byler." John looked up from his plate, his eyes gentle despite his stern features. "We will trust God for what comes," he said simply, and returned to his meal. Luna nodded, understanding that no more needed to be said. Outside, a whip-poor-will called into the gathering night, and the familiar sound brought an unexpected comfort. Perhaps here, in this house with this quiet man, she might find a measure of peace after all. Days slipped by like water in a stream, each one bringing its own quiet rhythm to Luna's new life at John's farm. Though her body grew heavier with child, she found purpose in the daily tasks. Her needle flew through torn shirts and worn socks, mending each with careful stitches. In the kitchen, she kneaded bread dough until her arms ached, the familiar motions bringing comfort as the house filled with the sweet scent of baking. One Sunday morning dawned clear and cool. Luna stood before the mirror, adjusting her white prayer covering with trembling fingers. Her black dress, though modestly cut, couldn't hide her advancing condition. The apron she tied around her waist only seemed to emphasize what lay beneath. John waited by the buggy, his Sunday best neat and pressed. He offered his hand to help her up, his touch steady and sure. The horses' hooves clip-clopped against the packed dirt road as they made their way to meeting, the morning sun warming their faces. Luna's heart began to pound as the white-painted meeting house came into view. Other buggies were already lined up outside, and small groups of people in their Sunday clothes stood talking in low voices. As John helped her down from the wagon, the conversation stopped. Heads turned. Whispers rose like leaves in a wind. She shows no shame. Poor John Yoder. That English baby she carries. Luna kept her eyes fixed on the ground as they walked toward the building. John's presence beside her was like a shield, but it couldn't stop the whispers from reaching her ears. Inside, they took their places on the hard wooden benches, men on one side, women on the other. Luna felt the stares of the other women boring into her back. The bishop rose to deliver his sermon, his stern gaze sweeping across the congregation. His words fell like stones into the quiet room. "The wages of sin is death," he intoned, his voice carrying to every corner. "Those who embrace impurity bring shame, not only on themselves, but on all who shelter them. We must guard against the corruption of worldly ways." Luna's cheeks burned. She bowed her head lower and lower, wishing she could disappear entirely. Across the aisle, John sat straight-backed in his seat, one calloused hand resting on his well-worn Bible. His face remained calm, but his jaw was set in a firm line. After the last hymn faded away, the congregation began to disperse. But before John and Luna could reach their buggy, a group of elders intercepted them. Their faces were stern beneath their broad-brimmed hats. "Brother Yoda," the eldest among them spoke, his white beard quivering, "we would speak with you about this situation." John stood his ground, his voice clear and steady. "Speak then, Brother Stoltzfus. Why did you choose this path?" Another elder demanded. "To take in one who has strayed so far? It sets a poor example for our young people." The small crowd that had gathered drew closer, eager to hear John's response. Luna's hands twisted in her apron as she waited for his answer. John's voice rang out strong and true. "God's word commands us to protect the widow and the fatherless. This child," he gestured toward Luna's swollen belly, "deserves protection, not condemnation. I follow God's leading in this matter." A ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd. The elders exchanged dark looks, but John's unwavering stance gave them pause. After a moment of tense silence, they stepped aside, though their disapproval remained plain on their faces. The drive home seemed longer than usual. The steady clip-clop of the horses' hooves marked time as Luna's tears fell freely. The emotions she'd held back during meetings spilled over at last. "They'll never accept the baby," she whispered, her voice breaking. "My child will always be marked as different, as English." John pulled gently on the reins, slowing the horse to a walk. When he spoke, his voice was soft but firm. "This child will bear my name," he said simply. Luna's tears stopped abruptly. She turned to look at him, stunned by his words. His profile was strong against the afternoon sky, his expression resolute. The horse plodded steadily onward as Luna sat in wondering silence, trying to grasp the full meaning of what he had just promised. The rest of the journey passed in silence, broken only by the creak of the buggy wheels and the peaceful sounds of a Sunday afternoon. But something had shifted between them, like a door opening to let in light. The following week brought clear skies and warming temperatures that drew John to the fields from sunup to sundown. Luna watched from the farmhouse window as he guided the plough behind their sturdy draft horse, turning the rich earth row by row. Though only a short distance separated them, she felt the weight of solitude pressing in around her. To fill the quiet hours, Luna began reading scripture aloud while she worked at her mending or kneaded bread dough. Her voice, soft at first, grew stronger as she found comfort in the familiar words. The Psalms especially drew her, with their cries for mercy and promises of refuge. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want," she read, one hand resting on her growing belly. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, warming the wooden floorboards. "He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters." The words seemed to settle into the very walls of the house, making it feel less empty. When the baby stirred within her, she would pat her middle gently and continue reading, hoping somehow the little one could hear and would know peace. That evening, after the supper dishes were cleared away, Luna sat in the wooden rocker by the hearth, while John settled into his usual chair. The fire crackled softly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Luna's fingers worked at her knitting, but her mind was elsewhere, gathering courage for the question that had lived in her heart since that first day in the town square. Finally, she set down her needles. "John?" He looked up from his Bible. "Ja?" "Why?" She swallowed hard and started again. "Why did you choose me?" "That day, when they—" She couldn't finish, but he understood. John was quiet for a long moment, his weathered hands folded over the leather-bound book in his lap. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. "My Anna, she—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "We prayed for children, year after year, but the Lord didn't grant them to us before He called her home." Luna sat very still, hardly daring to breathe as he continued. "After she passed, I spent many nights on my knees, asking God why He left me alone. But then I began to pray different prayers. I asked Him to send me family, however He saw fit." John's eyes met hers across the firelit room. "When I saw you that day, I knew He had answered." Tears welled in Luna's eyes. The kindness in his voice broke something loose inside her, and words she had held back for months spilled forth. I thought He would come back for me." Her voice trembled. Daniel Blackbird. He worked on the railroad survey crew that passed through last summer. He spoke so beautiful about the future we would have. She wrapped her arms around herself, as if warding off a chill. He was half Lenape, but he said it didn't matter, that we could make our own way. John listened silently, his face showing no judgment as Luna continued. "When I told him about the baby, he promised to return with money for us to start fresh somewhere else. But weeks passed, then months." A sob caught in her throat. "He never came back." The fire popped and sparked in the silence that followed. Luna wiped her eyes with her apron, unable to look at John, afraid of what she might see in his face. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I have brought shame not only on myself but on you as well." "A child of mixed blood. Stop." John's voice was firm but kind. "Every child is a gift from God. Nothing else matters." Luna raised her eyes to find him looking at her with the same steady compassion he had shown that first day. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, but these were different. Tears of relief, of gratitude for this unexpected mercy. I think I will retire early tonight," she said softly, rising from the rocker. "Thank you for listening, John." He nodded, watching as she crossed to the stairs. "Gute Nacht, Luna." "Gute Nacht." After her footsteps faded above, John remained in his chair, staring into the flames. The revelation of the child's father added layers to an already complex situation. He knew how both communities, plain and English, viewed such unions. The child would face prejudice from all sides. But as he sat there in the firelight, John's resolve only grew stronger. He had promised protection to Luna and her child, and he would keep that promise, whatever the cost. The fire burned lower as he pondered the path ahead, thinking of the challenges they would face as a family. For that was what they were becoming, despite all odds. Dark clouds rolled across the spring sky, bringing relentless rain that swelled the creek beyond its banks. The water crept steadily toward John's newly planted fields, threatening the tender seedlings that had just begun to break through the soil. "We must save what we can," John said, pulling on his heavy boots. Luna stood at the window, watching the angry waters rise. Without hesitation, she reached for her shawl. "I want to help," she said firmly, despite her advanced condition. John studied her face, seeing determination beneath her gentle features. He nodded once and handed her a spare pair of work gloves. Together they worked through the morning, digging shallow trenches to direct water away from the vulnerable crops. Luna's back ached, but she persevered, gathering stones to reinforce the channels while John wielded the shovel. Her quiet strength surprised him. Where others might have complained, she worked steadily, pausing only when necessary to catch her breath. By mid-afternoon, the rain had settled into a steady drizzle. As they made their way back to the house, mud-splattered and weary, they spotted a rider approaching. It was the circuit preacher, his black coat glistening with rain. "God's peace to you," he called out, dismounting carefully in the yard. "I hope I might find shelter until this weather passes." "You are welcome here," John replied, helping the older man with his horse, while Luna hurried inside to stoke the fire and prepare a meal. Soon they sat around the kitchen table, steam rising from bowls of hot stew. The preacher's kind eyes crinkled at the corners as he blessed the food. His presence seemed to fill the room with warmth, despite the dreary weather outside. "The Lord's ways are not our ways," he said thoughtfully, breaking off a piece of bread. "Too often we mistake man's judgment for God's will." His gaze settled on Luna, who had been quiet throughout the meal. "Christ's heart was always with those whom others cast aside." Luna's hands trembled slightly as she poured more tea. The preacher's words touched something deep within her that had been aching for acceptance. "But the community," she began softly. "The community," the preacher interrupted gently, "is not always right." Jesus himself challenged the rigid rules of his day when they lacked compassion. He glanced at John, who sat listening intently, though his expression remained unchanged. "Love is the higher law." Later that evening, as rain drummed steadily on the roof, the preacher asked to pray over Luna and her unborn child. She knelt by her chair while he laid weathered hands upon her head. "This little one is chosen," he declared with quiet certainty. "Not cast aside, but chosen for God's purpose." Luna's tears fell freely as his words washed over her like a healing balm. John watched from his place by the fire, his face unreadable, but his eyes never leaving Luna's bowed form. The preacher departed at first light the next morning, leaving behind an atmosphere of peace that lingered even after he'd gone. Luna found herself repeating his words throughout the day. Chosen, not cast aside, holding them close like precious gems. But the outside world soon intruded on their quiet sanctuary. Sister Byler's sharp tongue had been busy, spreading poison through the community. Word reached the farm that she was telling others the mixed-blood child would bring a curse upon them all. John heard the gossip while loading supplies at the general store. His only outward reaction was to grip his plow handle so tightly his knuckles turned white as he worked that afternoon. But inside, his resolve hardened like iron. He had made a promise to protect this household, and he would keep it, no matter how the community scorned them. That night, as rain returned to drum against the roof, Luna sat in her rocker by the fire, one hand resting on her rounded belly. John sat in his usual chair, reading his Bible by lamplight. "Thank you," Luna whispered, breaking the comfortable silence. John looked up, questioning. "For being our shield?" She explained softly. "For standing strong when others would tear us down." He nodded once, his expression gentle, though his words were few. "Rest easy, Luna. No harm will come to you or the little one while I draw breath." The rain fell steady outside, but within the farmhouse, hope bloomed like spring flowers after a storm. The preacher's blessing and John's quiet strength combined to give Luna courage for whatever lay ahead. She rocked slowly, at peace despite the darkness gathering beyond their walls. The July sun beat down mercilessly on the farmland, turning the fields into a shimmering sea of heat waves. Inside the farmhouse, Luna moved slowly between tasks, her advanced pregnancy making every step an effort. John had insisted she rest frequently, setting up a shaded spot on the porch with a comfortable chair and a pitcher of well water kept cool by wrapping it in damp cloths. "The work will keep," he'd say firmly whenever she tried to do more than he thought wise. His stern exterior had softened over the months, revealing an attentiveness that still surprised her. The heat pressed heavily as evening approached, the air thick and still. Luna shifted restlessly in her bed, unable to find comfort. Shortly after midnight, she woke to sharp pains that made her gasp. Her hands clutched at the quilt as she recognized what was happening. "John!" she called out, her voice trembling. "It's time!" He appeared in her doorway almost instantly, fully dressed as if he hadn't slept. One look at her face told him everything he needed to know. Without a word, he grabbed his lantern and headed for the barn. The sound of hoofbeats thundered through the quiet night as John urged his horse down the dirt road, the lantern swinging wildly and casting strange shadows. His heart pounded with each stride of his mount. The midwife lived 3 miles away. It felt like the longest ride of his life. Back at the farmhouse, Luna paced slowly, breathing through the intensifying pains. Each contraction brought both fear and hope closer to the surface. When John returned with the midwife, Luna nearly cried with relief. The older woman took charge immediately, her calm efficiency soothing Luna's nerves. "You're doing well," she assured her, checking her progress. "The baby's coming right as it should." Hours passed in a blur of pain and encouragement. John remained nearby, fetching water and clean linens as needed, his presence a steady anchor. As the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, the midwife's voice grew more urgent. "Push now, Luna! The baby's almost here!" With one final, tremendous effort, Luna brought her daughter into the world. The baby's first cry split the morning air, strong and clear and beautiful. Tears streamed down Luna's face as the midwife placed the tiny infant in her arms. "She's perfect," Luna whispered, counting fingers and toes with trembling hands. The baby's skin was a shade darker than her own, her features a delicate blend of both parents. Luna touched the dark wisps of hair on her daughter's head with wonder. John knelt beside the bed, his usually stern face transformed by awe as he gazed at the newborn. His large, work-roughened hand reached out tentatively to touch the baby's tiny fist. The infant's fingers curled around his thumb, and something in his chest tightened with emotion. The midwife watched this tableau while she cleaned up, her expression concerned. "The community may not welcome this child," she warned quietly, thinking of the gossip that would surely follow. "There will be talk." John looked up from the baby, his jaw set with familiar determination. "This is my daughter," he stated firmly, leaving no room for argument. "She will be raised in this house, under my name and protection." The midwife nodded, knowing better than to press the issue. She left them with instructions for Luna's recovery and promises to return the next day to check on them both. As evening settled over the farm, Luna lay propped up in bed, weak but filled with joy she hadn't thought possible months ago. John had brought his rocking chair into her room and sat near the window, holding the sleeping infant. The last rays of sunlight filtered through the glass, casting a gentle glow over father and daughter. Luna watched them, her heart full. The sight of John's strong hands cradling the tiny bundle so carefully brought fresh tears to her eyes. This man, who had rescued her from shame and given her shelter, now rocked her daughter with such tenderness it made her throat tight with emotion. "She will never know shame," Luna whispered into the quiet room, her voice carrying both promise and gratitude. John looked up from the baby's peaceful face, meeting Luna's eyes. He nodded once, and she saw moisture glistening in his own eyes, caught by the warm lamplight. No words were needed. His commitment to them both was written clearly in his expression and in every gentle movement as he rocked their daughter. In that moment, as twilight deepened outside and crickets began their evening song, Luna felt the last pieces of her broken world settling into place. Here in this room, with this man who had chosen to be father to her child, she had found something she'd thought forever lost. The promise of family, built not on judgment but on love. 2 weeks after the birth, sunlight streamed through the farmhouse windows as Luna dressed for Sunday meeting. Her hands trembled slightly as she pinned her prayer covering in place. In the nursery, John stood over the cradle, carefully wrapping their daughter in a soft blanket. The baby's dark eyes watched him intently as his large hands moved with surprising gentleness. "Are you certain about this?" Luna asked softly, adjusting her plain dress. She knew what reaction awaited them at the meeting house. John's expression remained steady as he lifted the infant. "It's time," he said simply. "The community must see who she is, who we are as a family." The buggy ride to meeting was quiet, save for the clip-clop of hooves and their daughter's occasional coos. Luna held the baby close, drawing strength from her warmth. As they approached the meeting house, she saw people gathering outside, their conversation dying as the buggy drew near. John helped Luna down, then took the baby himself. His stance was proud, but not defiant, as he carried his daughter toward the building. The crowd parted silently, eyes fixed on the infant in his arms. Some gazes held curiosity, others judgment. Sister Byla's lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. Inside, they took their usual bench. The silence grew heavier as more people filed in, whispers following in their wake. Luna kept her eyes lowered, but John sat straight, cradling the baby with natural ease. When the singing began, his deep voice joined the hymns without hesitation. After the third hymn, during the pause before the sermon, John rose unexpectedly. Luna's heart jumped as he stepped into the aisle, still holding their sleeping daughter. His voice, when it came, filled the meeting house with quiet authority. "Brothers and sisters," he began, looking around the room, 2 weeks ago, God blessed this house with a child. He lifted the baby slightly, her dark features clearly visible to all. Some would say she doesn't belong among us because of her bloodlines, but I stand here to tell you, bloodlines do not define us. God measures the heart. Gasps echoed off the wooden walls. Luna saw several women cover their mouths in shock. But John wasn't finished. "This child is mine," he declared firmly, "not by birth, but by choice and by God's grace. He has given her into my care, and I will raise her in his ways." The bishop stood then, his face stern. "Brother Yoda, you risk much with such words. The Ordnung is clear about keeping ourselves separate. This defiance could lead to expulsion." John met the bishop's gaze steadily. "Then I will answer to God for following his command to love the fatherless more than man's rules." More murmurs rippled through the congregation, but Luna noticed something unexpected. Several of the younger members were nodding slightly. Mary Lapp, who had recently married, watched the baby with soft eyes. Young Jacob Miller, soon to be baptized, sat straighter as if John's words had struck a chord. The rest of the service passed in a blur. Luna hardly heard the sermon, too aware of the mix of reactions around them. Some faces showed outright disapproval, others uncertainty, and a precious few, reflected thoughtful consideration. On the ride home, Luna trembled with the aftermath of emotion. Fear and pride warred in her heart. Fear of rejection, pride in John's courage. The baby slept peacefully, unaware of the storm her existence had stirred. "What you said today," Luna finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper, "it will change things." John guided the horse around a bend in the road. "Perhaps it's time for change," he answered quietly. "God's love knows no boundaries. Why should ours?" The afternoon passed peacefully. Luna tended to household tasks while John did the evening chores. As sunset approached, they sat down to a simple supper of bread, cheese, and cold ham. The baby slept soundly in her cradle beside the table, one tiny fist curled near her face. Outside, crickets began their evening chorus as shadows lengthened across the farmyard. John finished his meal and sat back, his eyes moving from Luna to the sleeping infant. "She will grow strong," he murmured, his voice gentle but certain. "We will endure." Luna looked up from her plate, a faint smile touching her lips. For the first time since learning she was with child, she truly believed it might be possible. Not just to survive, but to thrive, to build something new and beautiful from the ashes of shame and rejection. The crickets sang on as evening settled over the farm, their steady chirping a reminder that life continues season after season through all changes and challenges. In the growing darkness, Luna watched John reach out to touch their daughter's tiny hand, and she saw in that simple gesture all the promise of tomorrow. Golden wheat swayed in the late summer breeze as Luna stood on the porch, gently rocking her daughter. The baby's dark eyes were fixed on a butterfly dancing over the garden flowers. John had been in the fields since dawn, preparing for the harvest. His steady presence over these past months had become Luna's anchor, as reliable as the sunrise. The sound of hoofbeats broke the afternoon quiet. Luna shaded her eyes, watching a rider approach along the dusty road. As he drew closer, her heart stuttered. She would know that proud bearing anywhere. Daniel Blackbird. His dark hair was longer now, and his clothes spoke of prosperity, but his face was exactly as she remembered. He dismounted at the gate, his movements fluid and graceful. For a long moment, he simply stared at Luna and the baby. Shock and longing flickered across his features, making him look younger, more like the man who had once promised her the world. "Luna," he said softly, his voice carrying across the yard. "I heard talk in town, but—" His eyes fixed on the infant. "Is she?" Luna clutched her daughter closer. "Her name is Ruth," she answered, her voice barely steady. Daniel's hands tightened on the gate. "May I come in?" She hesitated, then nodded. As he walked up the path, she saw John approaching from the wheat field, his expression watchful but composed. Inside the farmhouse, they sat around the kitchen table. The baby dozed in Luna's arms while tension filled the air. Daniel's gaze kept returning to the child, drinking in her features. "I work for the railroad now," he finally said, breaking the silence. "They sent me to survey this region for track expansion." He turned to John. "Your bottomland, the portion along the creek, it's exactly what they need. I came to make an offer." John's face remained impassive, though his jaw tightened slightly. "The land's not for sale." Daniel leaned forward. "The railroad pays well. Very well." His eyes moved to Luna. "I've come for more than land. I want to make things right. I have a good position now, a future to offer." He gestured to the baby. "She's my daughter. I aim to claim her, and her mother, properly." Luna's hands trembled as she held Ruth. Memories flooded back. Daniel's passionate speeches about making his fortune, his promises of return, the long months of silence that followed. Yet looking at him now, successful and determined, she felt the pull of what might have been. "You left," she whispered, "when I needed you most." Pain crossed Daniel's face. "I was wrong. But I'm here now, ready to take responsibility." He stood, straightening his vest. "I'll return tomorrow. Think on what I've said. Both the land and—" He looked at the baby once more. "My family." After he rode away, Luna stood at the window, watching dust settle on the road. Her heart felt as unsettled as the air. John moved quietly around the kitchen, putting away dishes from their interrupted meal. "I don't know what to think," Luna admitted, her voice shaking. "All those months I prayed he'd return. Now," she turned to John, searching his face. "What should I do?" John paused in his work, considering his words carefully. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. "A father is not who sows the seed, but who tends the field." The simple wisdom of his words settled deep in Luna's heart. She watched as he took his hat from its peg by the door. "I need to check the barn lanterns," he said quietly. Though his expression remained steady, Luna saw the weight in his shoulders as he walked out into the gathering dusk. Through the window, she watched his broad figure move across the yard. The man who had shielded her from shame, who had claimed her child as his own, who had defied his community to protect them both. His footsteps were heavy as he disappeared into the barn, and Luna knew his heart was equally burdened. Ruth stirred in her arms, making small sounds of hunger. Luna sat in the rocking chair to nurse her, studying her daughter's features in the fading light. She saw Daniel there, in the dark eyes, the proud set of the tiny nose. But she also saw something of John in the baby's expressions, a quiet steadiness that came not from blood, but from months of gentle care and constant love. The crickets began their evening chorus as shadows lengthened across the farmyard. In the barn, a warm glow appeared as John lit the lanterns, a beacon of security in the growing darkness. Luna rocked slowly, holding her sleeping daughter, while questions and memories swirled like leaves in an autumn wind. Dawn painted the eastern sky in soft pinks and golds as Luna stepped onto the porch, cradling Ruth against her shoulder. The morning air held the crisp promise of autumn, though summer's warmth still lingered. Through the misty fields, she spotted John already at work, his strong hands guiding the plough behind his draft horse. She watched him for a moment, noting how his shoulders seemed heavier than usual. Ruth fussed slightly, and Luna adjusted her shawl, deciding to bring John some water. As she approached, the freshly turned earth released its rich scent, dark furrows stretching across the bottom land like neat rows of writing. John paused when he saw her, removing his hat and wiping his brow. "You're up early," he said softly, accepting the dipper of water she offered. "Couldn't sleep much," Luna admitted, shifting Ruth to her other arm. The baby reached toward John with tiny fingers, and his stern face softened slightly. He handed back the dipper and gazed across his land, toward the creek that marked its boundary. "The railroads had their eye on this valley for months now," he explained, his voice quiet but troubled. "These bottomlands, they're perfect for laying track. Level ground, good drainage." He ran his calloused hand along the plough handle. "They've been buying up farms all through the county." Luna's heart tightened. "What happens if you refuse to sell?" John's jaw clenched. "They have lawyers, government connections, ways of forcing folk to leave their land." He turned to her, his eyes grave. "I've heard tell of eminent domain, legal pressure no farmer can fight." Tears pricked at Luna's eyes as she looked around at the prosperous farm, the neat house, the well-tended fields, the sturdy barn. All of it at risk because of Daniel's return. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I never meant to bring trouble to your door." Before John could respond, Ruth began to cry in earnest. Luna excused herself to take the baby inside for feeding, her thoughts churning like leaves in a storm. She had just settled in the rocking chair when hoofbeats announced another visitor. Daniel dismounted with his usual grace, but today he wore a fine suit that spoke of city business. When Luna opened the door, he removed his hat, revealing hair neatly trimmed since yesterday. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice gentle but determined. Luna nodded, though she kept Ruth close against her chest. They sat at the kitchen table, sunlight streaming through the windows John had installed himself. "The railroad's prepared to pay 3 times what this land is worth," Daniel said, laying papers on the table. "It's a generous offer, enough to buy twice the acreage elsewhere, build a fine house." His dark eyes found hers. "We could start fresh, Luna. Give our daughter the life she deserves." Luna's hands trembled as she stroked Ruth's hair. "She already has a good life here." "Does she?" Daniel leaned forward. "What about when she's older? When the community shuns her for her blood? I can give her a future without shame. Schools, opportunities, a father who understands both her worlds." Old wounds throbbed in Luna's heart. She remembered the sting of rejection, the whispers behind hands, the way even her own family had turned away. "You left us," she whispered. "I was wrong," Daniel admitted, "but I'm here now, with the means to make it right." He reached across the table, not quite touching her hand. "Come with me, Luna. Bring our daughter home." The screen door creaked, and John's steady footsteps entered the kitchen. Daniel stood, gathering his papers. "Think on it," he said softly. "I'll return tomorrow for your answer." With a nod to John, he departed. Luna remained at the table, tears sliding down her cheeks. John moved quietly around the kitchen, putting on water for tea. The familiar domestic sounds anchored her, even as doubt churned inside. "What if he's right?" she finally asked. "About Ruth's future here?" John placed a steaming cup before her. "This is your home," he said firmly. "No man can take that unless you wish it." His eyes held hers. Not the railroad, not Daniel Blackbird. They ate their evening meal in thoughtful silence, broken only by Ruth's contented babbling. As Luna cleared the dishes, the weight of decision pressed heavy on her heart. "I'm afraid," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, "of choosing wrong. Of bringing more trouble to your door." John looked up from where he sat, his Bible open before him. "Truth be told," he said slowly, "I'm afraid too." His weathered hands traced the familiar pages. "Not of losing the land, though it breaks my heart, but of losing your trust, the family we've built here." Luna's throat tightened at his words. Without speaking, they bowed their heads together in prayer, while Ruth cooed softly in her cradle. The evening light streamed through the windows, painting the kitchen in warm gold as they sought guidance in the growing shadows. The autumn wind carried whispers through Lancaster, sharp as fallen leaves. Luna heard them at the general store, in the rustling of skirts and the sudden silences when she passed. The elders gathered in tight circles after Sunday meetings, their faces drawn with concern. "The railroad means progress," she overheard one saying. "Think of the commerce it would bring." "And Yoda stands in the way of all our prosperity," another added, not bothering to lower his voice. Luna clutched Ruth closer, hurrying past. The baby's dark eyes, so like her father's, blinked up at her innocently. The weight of community pressure settled heavy on her shoulders, like a wool cloak soaked with rain. That afternoon, Sister Byler appeared at the farmhouse door uninvited, her thin lips pressed into a disapproving line. Luna reluctantly invited her in, setting water to boil for tea, while Ruth napped in her cradle. "You know what they're saying in town," Sister Byler began, settling her black skirts around her chair. "The railroad's offer is more than fair. John Yoda's pride will bring shame on us all." Luna's hands trembled as she set out cups. "It's not pride," she defended softly. "It's his home." "And what of the child's real father?" Sister Byler's voice turned knife-sharp. Daniel Blackbird has a rightful claim. The Ordnung is clear on such matters. John has been more of a father than what? Than the man who gave her life. Sister Byler leaned forward. Think carefully, girl. Your stubbornness affects more than just yourself now. Luna's chest tightened, doubt creeping in like morning frost. When John returned from the fields, he found her crying quietly by Ruth's cradle. Their words, Luna whispered, wiping her eyes. They pierce like thorns. John's weathered face softened as he knelt beside her. Do you remember what the scripture tells us? His strong hand covered hers where it rested on the cradle. Perfect love casts out fear. But what if they're right? What if we're being selfish, holding on to this land? This isn't about land anymore, John said quietly. It's about family. About standing firm in what we know is right. The sunset painted the kitchen walls gold when Daniel appeared at the gate. His fine suit was dusty from riding, his face set with determination. John met him outside while Luna watched through the window, heart pounding. This has gone on long enough. Daniel's voice carried clearly in the evening air. The railroad wants an answer. Release your claim on both the land and the child. John stood empty-handed, his posture straight and calm. I cannot do that. Cannot or will not. Daniel stepped closer. That's my daughter in there. A daughter you abandoned, John replied steadily, along with her mother. I came back, didn't I? Daniel's fists clenched. With means to provide for them both. What can you offer? A life of shame among people who despise her. I offer love without conditions, John said. A home built on faith, not fortune. Daniel's face darkened. You're a fool, Yoda. The railroad doesn't take kindly to stubborn farmers. They have ways of dealing with obstacles. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Daniel swung onto his horse. You'll regret this decision. He wheeled his mount around, calling over his shoulder, The railroad will handle it their way now. Luna's hands shook as she lifted Ruth from her cradle, holding her close while pacing the darkening kitchen. The baby's warm weight anchored her as she whispered prayers into the soft black hair. Lord, protect us. Show us the path through this valley. John came in quietly, checking the locks on doors and windows. Without speaking, he took his rifle from its pegs above the hearth. The weapon seemed out of place in his gentle hands, but his eyes were determined as he settled into the chair by the window. You don't mean to use that, Luna said softly. No, John agreed, his voice steady. But they need to know we won't be frightened away. He looked up at her, standing with Ruth in the lamplight. We're family now. Whatever comes, we face it together. Luna nodded, rocking Ruth gently as the baby drifted to sleep. Outside, crickets sang their evening chorus, a peaceful counterpoint to the tension hanging in the air. John kept his vigil by the window, rifle across his knees, not in threat but in quiet resolve. The lamp burned low, casting long shadows across the floor. Yet in the darkness, Luna felt a strange peace settle over her heart. Whatever storms approached, they would weather them as one. Perfect love truly did cast out fear, replacing it with something stronger, the courage to stand firm in what was right. Autumn painted the Lancaster countryside in russet and gold, but the morning brought no beauty. A chill wind whipped across the farmyard as hoofbeats thundered down the dirt road. Luna stood in the doorway, her heart racing as she counted the riders. 6 men on horseback, Daniel Blackbird among them. John had been splitting wood. He set down his axe deliberately, brushing sawdust from his plain black vest. His Bible lay on the chopping block where he'd been reading during his rest. Stay on the porch, he told Luna quietly. Keep Ruth close. The riders pulled up in a cloud of dust. Their leader, a thick-necked man in a fine suit, dismounted first. His boots were city-made, unmarked by honest labor. A badge on his vest marked him as a railroad company foreman. "John Yoder," the foreman's voice carried across the yard. "I'm Herbert Manning of the Pennsylvania Railroad Company." He pulled papers from his coat. "We're here to serve notice of eviction." Luna clutched Ruth tighter, the baby whimpering at the tension in her mother's arms. John walked forward slowly, hands open at his sides. "This is my land," he said. "Deeded proper and paid for." Manning's laugh was harsh. "Was your land. The county's ruled in our favor. Either sell now at our price, or we'll take it through the courts." He gestured at the other men. "These fellows are here to help you understand the situation." The railroad men spread out, hands resting meaningfully on their gun belts. Only Daniel remained mounted, his face unreadable as he watched John. John reached for his Bible, and two men drew their pistols. But he simply held the worn book, his voice carrying clearly across the yard. "My father worked this soil. My children will work it after me. No paper from your courts can break that bond." "Your children?" Manning sneered, glancing at Luna and Ruth. "That half-breed bastard isn't yours, Yoder." "We all know it." He turned to Daniel. "Tell him, Blackbird. Tell him whose blood runs in that child's veins." Daniel's horse shifted beneath him as the wind gusted. His eyes moved from John to Luna, then to the baby in her arms. Something flickered across his face. Pain, or perhaps understanding. "Get down here," Manning ordered. "Tell these stubborn fools what's what." "It's your claim that gives us leverage." Slowly, Daniel dismounted. His boots hit the earth with a solid thud. He took one step forward, then another, but not toward John. Instead, he faced Manning. "No," Daniel said. The foreman's face reddened. "What do you mean, no?" "That's your child." "A child I abandoned." Daniel's voice was quiet but firm. "A child I left to shame and hardship, while this man—" He gestured to John. "This man gave them a home. Gave them his name, his protection." He straightened his shoulders. "I cannot take what belongs to another man's heart. This child has a father already." Silence fell across the farmyard, broken only by the wind in the corn and Ruth's soft cooing. Manning's face twisted with fury as he realized his leverage was crumbling. "You ungrateful savage!" he spat. "After all the railroad's done for you?" "The railroad's done nothing but take," Daniel cut him off. "From my people, from these farmers. I won't help you take more." Luna felt tears streaming down her face as she watched the scene unfold. John hadn't moved, but his eyes shone with quiet approval at Daniel's words. Manning looked at his men uncertainly. Without Daniel's claim to the child, their legal position was weaker. The county judge might not look so favorably on their case now. "This isn't over, Yoder," he snarled, crumpling the eviction notice. "We'll find another way. The railroad always gets what it wants." "Perhaps," John replied calmly. "But not today." The foreman swung back onto his horse, jerking the reins hard. "Mount up," he barked at Daniel. "You'll regret this betrayal." But Daniel shook his head. "I quit. Find someone else to do your dirty work." Manning spat in the dust, then spurred his horse. The other men followed, leaving Daniel standing alone in the yard. The thunder of hooves faded into the distance as dust settled around them. Luna rushed down the porch steps, her feet carrying her forward before she could think. John met her halfway, his strong arm encircling her and Ruth both. Daniel watched them, his expression a mixture of sadness and peace. "Thank you," Luna whispered, meeting his eyes over Ruth's dark curls. "I should have done right by you long ago." Daniel replied softly. but at least now I can do right by her." He looked at John. "Take care of them." "With God's help," John said, extending his free hand. "Always." The two men clasped hands briefly, a moment of understanding passing between them. Then Daniel turned and walked away down the road, leaving the little family standing together in the autumn wind. Luna's tears fell freely now as she leaned into John's embrace. Ruth reached up to pat her mother's wet cheek, making them both laugh softly. Above them, the wind rustled through golden leaves, carrying away the last echoes of conflict and leaving behind the sweet sound of peace. Autumn mellowed into softer days. The morning frost sparkled on pumpkins dotting John's fields as the community struggled with change. At Sunday meetings, the divide showed clearly. Older members still turned away when John entered with Luna and Ruth, while younger faces offered tentative smiles. Sister Bela remained stern, but her sharp words found fewer eager ears. "The Ordnung cannot bend," she insisted one afternoon at the general store. Yet even as she spoke, others remembered how John had stood firm in his faith while showing mercy. Before leaving Lancaster County, Daniel stopped by the farm one last time. He carried a small, carved wooden horse for Ruth. "I am heading west," he told Luna as they stood in the yard. "Found work with an honest freight company in Ohio." His eyes were clear now, free of the angry fire that had driven him before. "You have a good life here." Luna nodded, holding Ruth close. "I hope you find peace," she said softly. "I already have," he replied, touching Ruth's cheek gently before mounting his horse and riding away. The harvest days grew shorter. John and Luna worked side by side in the golden fields, their movements falling into easy rhythm. Ruth watched from her basket in the shade, cooing at butterflies and falling leaves. Each evening they gathered around the table, sharing simple meals and prayers by lamplight. "Thank you, Lord, for your protection," John would say, his voice steady and sure. Luna's quiet "Amen" grew stronger with each passing day. One crisp Sunday after meeting, young Mary and Joseph Miller approached them shyly. "We admire how you stood against the railroad," Mary whispered, her husband nodding. "And how you show God's love is bigger than rules?" Luna's eyes filled with tears as she squeezed John's hand. Perhaps the walls of tradition could soften, one heart at a time. That evening, as Ruth slept peacefully in her cradle, Luna felt hope bloom like a late autumn flower, hardy and unexpected, but beautiful in its defiance of the coming winter. Winter settled over Lancaster County like a white quilt, the snow drifting across John Yoder's fields in peaceful waves. The farmhouse stood warm against the chill, lamplight glowing in its windows like a beacon of hope. Inside, the crackle of the hearth filled the room with comfort. John sat in his wooden rocker, little Ruth nestled in his arms. At 6 months old, she had grown into a happy baby, her cheeks round and rosy as she smiled up at him. Her tiny fingers curled around his thumb while he hummed an old hymn. Luna moved about the kitchen with quiet grace, sliding a fresh loaf of bread onto the table. The aroma of yeast and warmth filled the air as she began to hum along with John's tune. Their voices blended softly in the fire-lit room. After their simple supper, Luna drew out the family Bible, its leather cover worn smooth by years of faithful hands. Opening to the book of Psalms, she read in a clear voice, "The Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and plenteous in mercy." John knelt beside Ruth's wooden cradle, his calloused hands gentle on its edge. "Thank you, Lord," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "for the family I thought would never be mine." Luna crossed the room and placed her hand on his broad shoulder. "I never dreamed," she said softly, "that what began as punishment could become such blessing." He looked up at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. God always had shocking plans, for both of us. Outside, snow continued to fall in steady waves, but inside John Yoda's house, peace reigned supreme. The warmth of love and faith wrapped around them like a blanket, stronger than any winter wind. Thanks for being here. If this story stirred something in you, a memory, a feeling, a truth, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another moment that just might speak to your soul.